Hey everyone, it's Derek here with More Sauce Productions, and today we're talking about something personal, something a little bit sad, and if you are not interested in it, feel free to not watch this video. But I feel like I need to sort of get this off my chest. I need to share with you all and what's been going on in my life and all of these things that sort of have been affecting uploading, but not just uploading, but just my life in general. Let's just dive into it. So today, a year ago, my father passed away from stage 4 cancer. He had a brain tumor as well as liver cancer and lesions in his lungs as well. And he had been battling cancer for a while. For about 4 years, I believe, and he had a cancer scare from a brain tumor when I believe I was 10, so about 20 years ago. He had to have surgery to remove part of the tumor, and he was sort of in the clear for a good amount of time. Another growth came back, and he had been taking or going to chemotherapy, doing radiation as well as different pills, and eventually got onto a bunch of experimental trials. And after one of the experimental trials, things started really turning for the worst. He lost a great deal of weight, a good 20 pounds-ish, and you could sort of see it everywhere in his body, and sort of, everything becoming skin and bones. So that was one of the real things that, sort of shook me, was when I had to help him change clothes and all this other stuff. I started to have lunches with him more frequently because he had to go through a bunch of treatment. He was on long-term disability from his company that he was working with, and he kept going through a bunch of different treatments, and eventually it got to a point where he started just getting weaker and weaker, and his white blood cell count started decreasing, because that essentially happens when you're basically poisoning your body to sort of try to get rid of this cancer or try to shrink it a little bit, and none of the pills or treatments or what have you really did much for him. So eventually it got to a point where he couldn't really care for himself anymore. So he was basically bedridden for a good, I want to say 4-ish months, 3 to 4-ish months. After the conversation with the doctor, where he basically said that, there's really nothing else we can do for him, that's where everything started to become really real. And my entire family, as well as myself, just thought of him as this person that was invincible. We really thought of him as Superman. He was the toughest person that I knew, and he did so many things with his hands that they were just so rough out. Like, it was basically like a piece of metal over his hands. Like, he would shake his hand, and he would shake it very firmly just to show you he meant business and that he's a presence and a strong person. And all of that was taken away from him, and you could sort of see how that affected him and how it sort of affected my family, my mom, my brother, and the rest of my family, my fiance. And it was difficult because everybody saw him as this person that was going to die instead of who he was. And I kept watching over and over again people coming in and just looking at him and crying. yeah, I don't know, it was just difficult to see people just, you know, put on this, not facade or anything like that, but they would just look at him like, you know, they knew what was coming, and like there was no hope. And if you ever go through this, which I hope none of you have to go through this, but that's one thing that's a part of life. Part of life is death, and that's something that all of us will go through. That was one thing that really upset me, was that you looked at this person and instead of seeing who he was, you saw how this disease struck him and sort of took him down from his body perspective, and people would just talk to him as if, you know, he was already dead. And that really bothered me, because I would always talk to him like nothing had ever changed. And maybe one thing that I observed with being around him and other people was that he would just, like, people would just react, and then he would just become upset because he would want, like, people to interact with him as if everything was perfectly fine. And I could be wrong on this, but, you know, I really strongly believe that he wanted to be treated like he was still alive, because he still was alive. And, you know, he lived past, very far past what even the doctors expected. When we first went in for his checkup, they believed he would only be alive. They gave him an estimate of a year. And 4 years later, we're having sort of that same conversation about how long do you think I have? And then the doctor said, maybe a couple weeks. And having to bring that information to my mom. My mom is somebody who's one of the sweetest people in the entire world. And as much as one might, there's sort of two sides to seeing somebody in that condition. Some people think, well, just put him out of his misery. He's sort of just suffering there, you know. And it really got to a point where he was just, you know, depressed, didn't really want to talk to anybody, and just wanted to go. And I was observing this because I was over there like every day, and eventually got to a point where I had to sleep over, because he would, when he was on his medication, he would sleepwalk, and then he would wake up on the ground. So his bed was right next to where stairs were, and we didn't want him to fall down the stairs. So I slept over, and, you know, found him, you know, down on the ground once, and, you know, another time where, you know, he soiled himself, and, you know, it's just a bunch of things that you don't want to see a 62-year-old man go through any of this, because he's only 62, and this is really not something you want to see. But going through that was one of the most scariest times in my life, was when I had to experience my father, you know, falling down or on the ground where he couldn't get up, soiled himself, and we had to bring him into the shower and wash him off. And it was my mom and myself sort of cleaning him off and making sure that, you know, he was clean. And we got to see his entire body and sort of what all of the treatments had done to him. And it was scary, you know, just to see somebody go through this and to see somebody that you love have to deal with all of it. So it really got me to a point where we really couldn't watch him 24/7 because I was so worried about him falling down and getting hurt and just suffering even more. So eventually called hospice, which in our area, it's a place called Journey Care, and they took him in eventually. They had a couple nurses come out to him. It eventually got so severe that we were worried that he needed 24-hour care. So we had him brought into Journey Care, the facility in Glenview, and that was probably one of the better days, just because I didn't have to worry about my mother being worried that she's going to wake up at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. With her husband on the floor dying, and she wouldn't be able to help him up or anything like that. So there was a couple of times where he fell down and she called us over, and my brother and I had to rush over there to make sure that we can help him out. So really wasn't a pleasant experience, really was very stressful. And I'm not really telling the story because I want you to feel bad for me. I know there are plenty of people and plenty of others out there that really have things worse off than I do, really have just a tougher life, maybe grew up with no father or no parents. But I'm just sort of sharing my story from the past year and a half, which has been just one of the worst years and a half that I've experienced, stress-related wise, dealing with my father's death, dealing with a sudden cousin passing away, who was just a few years older than me, and eventually dealing with one of my father's really good friends passing away and being her executor of her will. That's really just what I wanted to talk about and sort of just share my experience. And, I don't want to bring, a bunch of darkness or sadness upon everybody. I really wanted to share this because it's really reinforces sort of my mantra and sort of what I'm all about, which is really savoring every day, making sure that you have the best life that you can and you live it to the fullest every day, and not just sort of half-assing it, saying I love you, making sure, doing the actions that you need to do to make sure the people that you care about feel that, and over and over again, just trying to live the best life you can with the limited time that you have, because over and over again, you don't know how much time you'll have, and nobody knows. So let's leave it with that. Just live your lives to the fullest and do good things, and don't waste the time that you have here. That's what I wanted to share. Thank you all for watching.
Only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in.